And control. Yeah.
There you go.
Only on my PC.
Bernard, you have everybody for coming to council and the full meeting. We have the entire council and the mayor, we have the police and fire chief and the service director as well. We have one item on the agenda, the discussion of ordinance 2025-04, amending section 412.06 of the traffic code related to parades, events, assemblages, processions, and races on public and city streets, and declaring an emergency. So we'll discuss this, and if it needs to be referred to council for the next agenda, we will do this. I thought the best way to go, it's a short ordinance, if we could just go through the 2 pages with the corrections, or not the corrections, the edits. And you have the red line version in front of you, so.
Pass out extra copy.
Yeah, we have, I have it there. Okay, so the first couple paragraphs are, I think just reiterating some things. There's nothing that, I don't feel is unreasonable. If anyone else has any, questions or comments on letters A and B.
Just a I noticed that we added the mayor, director of public safety. Is that in, was it underlined? So it wasn't in the original. I don't have the original.
It just said mayor and not director of police.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? And then letter C, this is.
Wait a minute, B, okay. 60 days is 2 months. Do you really want to go that long?
I'm sorry, no, I had it underlined. Yeah, I missed it. From 5 to 60 does seem excessive. I think it could be lowered. But sometimes events come up, or maybe they would, could be less than 2 months.
I mean, I can see 30,
Yeah,
but I think 2 months is a little stretch.
If I may, Deanna Herman Fisher has joined us. He leads up internally the logistics committee with regard to these events. And 60 is what came from the logistics committee. Deanna want to speak as to how administratively the committee came up with 60.
Sure. It's really working with the other departments and what they need in terms of lead time to see if they can have the personnel that's needed, and so that, and also so that we can have a safety plan and we can go through, all of the planning that we would have to do before an event. Give us enough time to do our planning and to notify the applicant of that. And we do have the department heads here who could speak more on that.
the only question I guess I would have is, over the past I would say 4 years, I think everybody can think of examples of gatherings, whether it's a trade or an event that is much faster, that comes together, whether it's a social justice thing or something that's happening, you know, in our communities, our countries, the world, and I'm just wondering how that fits into this, because it's talking about events, assemblages, also not just trades. Yeah, so I said,
Um, number one, we don't have a lot of these, do we? Do we have like 10, 15, 20 per year?
How many requests for events?
How many requests?
There's probably about between 5 and 10.
Between 5 and 10, so we don't have a lot per year. Am I correct?
We have between 5 and 10.
Okay. If we have between 5 and 10, how much of the city is covered by any one of those? Do they go through all 1.8 square miles of the city? Or do they only go through a small area?
Each of the events is different. I've seen all sorts of different things, and that's one of the reasons why we're recommending pre-approved routes, because oftentimes they want to cross a major street, and that causes.
I'm not asking that, how much of the city is, I can appreciate all of that, but I'm asking a very, very specific question. And that is, do these cover all of the city? Do they cover half of the city? How many how far would a normal event go in the city of University?
A lot of the events are 5K. That's typically what we see. And oftentimes they're requesting to cross major streets. And so we're trying to get them to,
How far do they go in the city? Do they go from Taylor all the way to Green when they do a 5?
typically not, typically they do a loop.
Okay, they do a loop, and the loop is relatively contained within a smaller area of the city.
As I said, oftentimes they're requesting to cross major streets. So
I
we
know
try to
that.
keep them within those
Yeah,
boundaries. I just-
all I'm trying to do is get a sense of how big an area these events are covering. Yes, they're gonna cross a major street at some point, I get that. That's all I'm trying to do is figure out how far that is. You said they don't go from Taylor all the way to Green. So we know the event is not, the event's 90%, I would think, or even 100%, don't go throughout the entire city. Probably the only thing that goes through the entire city might be the menorah. Because that does come in from Green and exits at Taylor. But these 5Ks are looping, and a lot of times I assume they're around John Carroll, right?
They're either in John Carroll or they're on the western side. Well, they could either be on the western side around the wall, or they could be on the eastern side around.
Okay, so they're sort of segmented, so we're not looking at a huge area plan. Is what I'm trying to get at. I mean, if we had parades or races that were gonna cover from Taylor to Green, you have an immense amount of planning to cover people and time to cover from one area all the way over to the other. As long and additionally crossing and coming up close to 1, 2, 3, 4 major intersections. So I get that. But now we're talking about 5 to 10 per year, relatively contained. So I would think that logistics and planning at this point probably don't need 60 days. At least take this down to 30.
I would refer to our department, I do. Copy on this one.
So for a traditional 5K, here is the same.
Yeah.
I don't.
I don't think
I
don't think
don't think any of the mics are.
None of them are on.
They're coming back on, green light should. For a typical 5K, we would have probably 5 officers Whether it's sworn officers or auxiliary assisting, manage and raise, a lot of it depends on the road, so. The different intersections or cross streets around it. But the biggest lead time for that, for the personnel is getting resources signed up and working with that. We have a process in place where if we can't staff the event with our own resources, that we then rely on the vendor. And we have to give them an adequate amount of time to staff, services that require, traffic control. And other types of similar personnel that we provide, and we just can't, we may not have them in power at the time. So there's a lead time to fill our own, personnel resources, and if we can't, we have to get lead time for the vendor to also do the same through a private entity or a contractor. In addition to the staffing component of that, which again can be two-tiered and has to have lead time for whether it's our organization or the entity that's requesting. We also have to create maintenance and traffic plans. We have to coordinate with the service department to see how many barricades, cones will be needed. We also have to create sometimes safety plans depending on the scope and size of the event that could require collaboration with the fire department as well. So the maintenance and traffic planning, the resources that are needed, and 2 tiers of lead time for filling the resource requirements can take a significant amount of time sometimes depending on the event.
At this point in time, how many new events are coming up that you're unaware of your needs for?
I don't have that information, but seems like there's requests that are always popping up annually. I haven't seen before that we would have to consider, from a fresh outlook on it.
I mean, with what you described, certainly 5 days is way short.
Yeah, what I'll say is the way the ordinance currently is, we've had a lot of difficulty administratively trying to manage different types of planning and also fill staffing and scheduling of the event to ensure that it's done so efficiently and safely. We've had a lot of issues with the current ordinance.
So, I'm sorry, Ms. Weiser, do you have? So I agree that there's pieces of this that need to be updated based on what you and the mayor have said. I want to make sure though that we cover everything in here because it's parades, it's events, it's assemblages. If you can, I don't know if it's Deanna or Chief or if it's you, I'm only aware of 2 races, and then we have the menorah parade, we have the city events, such as the concert, Fall Fest, Juneteenth. Is there anything else? Memorial Day parade, is there anything else that we're not aware of? Okay.
I'll just say from my own perspective, race requests pop up all the time from new vendors.
Let's turn on that.
It depends on the circumstances, but we have to take a good faith look at what the proposal is and go through our processes. And sometimes events have been turned down and denied because of the scoping impact on the community. But
Are those,
I would defer to either Deanna or the mayor for any additional specific events that I may not be thinking.
Yeah, I mean, to that end, a couple things. We have had events that were proposed where they may have even been willing to help subsidize some of the cost of the event, but we had no mechanism with which we could properly charge. And so we were at a point where even if we wanted to welcome a particular event to a community, have some of the streets closed, go through the process of having fire determine alternate routes for responding with ambulances and fire trucks while the event is going on, which takes considerable doing, especially if it's a group that we haven't seen before. These are things that we've been unable to commit to without tying up significant public resources and having no means to have them contribute to those resources without an ordinance.
Chief, what's the average overtime for policing that needs to be?
Maybe around 16 hours,
Okay, so it's not,
Minimum.
it's not anything,
minimum 60 if it's patrolling.
but that's not time and a half.
That would be time and a half, correct. keep in mind, if we're staffing it in-house, it's for officers that aren't typically already assigned to shift. So we have to rely on officers, that are not on shift or on schedule that day.
And you do a minimum of like
4
6
hours.
hours.
No, I'm sorry, 3 hours, 3 hours.
Okay, so I mean, your staffing is almost $1,000 alone. That's besides fire. if we need
And that's it.
anyone.
That's if we can get this, we have to have a reasonable amount of time to allow them, to sign up, voluntarily. If we can't get volunteers, then we look at the vendor of trying to staff it on their own as well.
Okay, so in your opinion, 60 days is needed, especially for a new event.
Yeah, 60 days, I would not object to, and I know is a product of, the committee that was utilized to present some of these concepts.
Okay.
For the.
This logistics committee is just like an administrative kind of committee that got together.
Yes.
Any other questions? Did you get?
I just want to go back to the mayor slash director of public safety. This body had approved a couple months ago that these would be separate positions. I mean, it could be the same person, but it could not be. So maybe we choose which one that would be. It makes sense to me that's the public safety realm, that maybe we just assign it to the director of public safety.
Or the and or.
Did we do and or in the ordinances? I don't know. I don't know the words that did that, but
Actually, yourself.
I-
Oh. Supervisor.
It should be, since this is public safety, really not administrative, it should be the director of public safety. Considering that the mayor most probably is the director of public safety, that resolves it, but it fits in that category, in that bucket, for what that person is assigned to do.
Does anyone else have any comment about that? Is everybody comfortable? So we'll be director of public safety. Will be those. For the title.
I'm thinking, I think 60 is excessive.
What,
I think 60 days is excessive. I think 30 days is more reasonable.
45. I'll get, I have another, issue that might dovetail off of that, but Ms. Weiser, did you want to say something else?
If you're saying we should put a pin in it for now and come back to it,
I'm not
well,
saying that.
then I do agree. I just think 60 is low.
I have 45, yeah, Mr. Goodman.
I prefer to hear from those that are doing the work. Chief Rogers had said 60, Chief Kirkland. Would you have a comment? What's your preference? I was just gonna come up and build on what Chief Rogers mentioned. He indicated fire does a safety planning in collaboration with their security planning. We do a safety analysis on all the events. We create an incident action plan that's built off the FEMA ICS model for all the city events. Even if the event is small and scope, it takes a considerable amount of time to build out those plans. And obviously, as the event expands and becomes larger, the legwork that goes into that is a lot more work on the upfront. Getting all the information from the event coordinator, and then going through the logistics meetings with Yana. It does take a lot of time. It's been challenging to try to meet time constraints, get these plans. We disseminate them to the shift to make sure that they're aware of everything. And we do a risk assessment, emergency vehicle access, egress. We look at fire protection, permitting. We need to do a food truck inspection, make sure it's permitted to be there. Medical response, things we consider the 5Ks, we'd be having like medical teams in place. We talked about communications for those types of events, crowd management. And then staffing that Chief Rogers touched on. And then as far as the amount of events each year, Although it seems relatively small historically, things change in the future, and I think we're trying to just take a best practice approach. When Juneteenth became a new event, that was much larger in scope and took a considerable amount of time of planning. There were a lot of extra components to the planning for that. We'll try to tackle each project with the same scope.
Chief, about how many officers, let's say on a run, or, EMTs, do you need
We typically staff a 3-person crew.
3-person crew? And what is their hourly rate?
It would be similar to police in that 60 range.
Okay.
Um,
And also for, 3 hours?
it's a 4-hour minimum.
Ms. Weiser?
I would think, Juneteenth, the Memorial Day parade, those are city events. It seems to me this ordinance covers outside events, group of persons of organization. And not the city. So excluding something like Juneteenth. How many of these events repeat?
Repeat as in each year.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have that data, but I would say a handful.
Okay, and once you prepare this extensive plan for that, you don't really have to redo the entire plan, or are we changing routes all the time, or what?
Yeah, that would depend. I'd say more often, some plans the route changes. It's probably what, 50/50?
Sometimes the route changes, sometimes something else changes.
The problem's not so much the route from the vendor, it's what's going on in the city. It's always construction, road projects, building projects. And I think the biggest issue we're running into are these event planners wanting to do events in the same day and competing route. And even regardless,
Obviously, this ordinance, I don't think anybody here would not want something that would cover somebody coming in and saying, oh, I want to do it on this day when you've already given a permit for that day to another group. I mean, that's the logic, whether the permit's issued 30 days before, or 45 days before, 60 days before, or 90 days. That's outside of the scope of the.
So with the current ordinance and the event that we have been having, have there been more, like many occasions or several occasions where it has taken more than 30 days, more than 45, or at least 60 days to get everything planned and executed?
we've used that time if it's been available, but typically we don't have that type of availability. It's more drop everything you're doing and try to get this done because they have, what, 5 days?
Right, now, I think 5 days is unrealistic for sure, like you said, because that to me puts a lot of pressure. But it
It'd be
seems to
different if
me
we
that,
had a person in the city that was just an events planner that took all of this, not was in the job. But these events become new tasks for each department to take on. And all the other competing work, so it takes some time to do it thoroughly.
Since this has become an issue in 2025, how many years have you, each department has to do this? Have you had to do this previously?
We've been doing these planning on fire for the safety planning for years.
For about how long?
Since I've been in this position, we've been doing these plans.
So, let's see,
So
8 years, 6 years, who did it before?
former fire chief, Can't speak.
We're not sure, okay, I don't mean to put you on the spot, it just, so, it's a valid question.
So, I mean, again, the chiefs feel that they need 60 days, especially if there's a new event. I'm okay with that, you're the experts on this. Where the kind of key comes in is where you have, let's say, events, parades, or assemblages that are that need to be timely, right? So again, the last 5 years, we've had, the whole country has had assemblages or events. And how can we deal with those in this ordinance? Because I think, you know, a lot of this, okay, somebody's gonna call for a parade 60 days before, or a race 60 days before, fine. But how are we gonna deal with, because this is supposed to cover that also. So how would the chiefs like to deal with something like that? Miss, I guess, Ms. Saxon, Ms. Marshall, and I'll let you answer.
Next, we separate them in this ordinance. We talk about parades and plan things, and then you talk about assemblages. You know, we define it if it's a different type of definition. And you address it that way. And then it's pretty clear, you know, there are things that are more widespread, take longer to coordinate, and things that are pretty quick. But turnaround for, whatever urgent reason.
Yes, Marshall?
Online, what I was thinking, even if we can put some wording in there, like making an exception for the 60 days unless, and put some verbiage in there. You know, it's 60 days unless, or, and put whatever circumstances that would be, because like you were saying, like I'm just thinking about a lot of the recent protests and things like that that are just coming up that people are doing, and a lot of people are participating in that. And those things were not planned within 60 days, and are we gonna tell our residents that they don't have the right to assemble? If they want to, you know, so that's what I'm looking.
Just have a question. Is this discussion, whether it's called a parade or an event, we're just talking about when it occurs in the roadway and disrupting flow of traffic?
So those assemblages and,
Yeah.
parades, I've seen them firsthand where people are blocking streets. Right or wrong, I just.
No, but the ordinance itself is traffic. So we're talking about any type of these events that are in the street. I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same thing unless I'm
Yeah, well,
misinterpreting.
Yeah, I think the chief's point is valid. If we were talking, if we had a Tesla dealership in our city, all the Tesla protests are on the sidewalk, and that wouldn't apply here. And they wouldn't be required to give 60 days to the city to go protest outside our Tesla dealership like they're doing. Because they're not doing it in the street, they're doing it on the sidewalk.
that's not what I'm talking about.
Well, but I thought we were talking about something.
Well, it's-
We're talking about things that have to, that will be going on the street, and I think that whether we like it or not, there might be some things that go on the street that maybe somebody wants it to happen quickly and they want to do it legally, so how do we let them have their First Amendment right? That's what I'm saying.
And under D, or is this supposed to be double E? The part number 1, it has the word assemblage in there. It says parade, event, assemblage, procession, or race. So that's where, what I'm referring to, it's in this word.
It's in letter A.
areas.
Yeah,
Pardon me, I'm sorry, Mayor, I didn't hear you.
It's covered in letter A, Ms. Marshall. Where it says, where it refers to, no person, group, or persons or organization shall conduct a statement, parade, event, assemblage, or procession, or race, other than a funeral procession, upon any street or highway,
Mhm.
or block off any street or highway area without first obtaining a permit. So letter A is already narrowing the scope to just those things that require being in the street or blocking off the street. So we're talking about, so it's not all assemblages, it's just the assemblages that are in the street.
So that's what we have to differentiate when. I don't know how exactly, maybe we need to speak to the law director on how to word it exactly, but. When there's a hot button topic that people would like to quickly assemble on the street, let's say it's marching down a block or something like that, peacefully. How can they obtain a permit quickly? And maybe that needs to be separated out.
I think we're overthinking. If there's gonna be a group that's gonna march down the street, I don't think they're worried about getting a permit. I think they're just gonna do it. if there's a,
Yeah.
well,
There could be both ways.
I think so, yeah. So they could have come to the director of public safety and apply for the permit if it's less than 60 days. The director of public safety could choose to make an exception. I mean, it's, you know,
It does, because all it takes is somebody complaining that you're not following the ordinance.
right, so what I'm looking at for what's in regards to having, we don't block the street. They were doing the work, they're recommending 60 days. None of us are doing the work on it. If they say 60, it should be 60. If somebody wants, if there's an event and there's gonna be something that comes up that somebody wants to, you know, march. If they're gonna march, they're gonna do it whether they get a permit or not. And no, that's the risk that they take. So, you know, what we're trying to do is if there's an orderly fashion and wanna come in. And if these events are usually planned out months in advance.
I
Months
think we're
in
all
advance.
comfortable with the 60
So-
days at this point. I think it's the carve out with some kind of, you know, speaking, yeah, Ms. Sams?
Thank you. Mayor and Vice Mayor, someone else who was here a few years ago, wasn't there a social justice assembly, I don't know if they marched or not, they did, I think it was like a matter or something in response to
That's video.
something. So what, did that end up in the street or was that just under what?
It's on the
Yeah, I'm happy
Okay,
to
so
go.
that's an example, something that happened pretty quickly, it was the right to assemble.
And that was one of the things in my head.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can elaborate on that. They did come to us and they wanted to close some streets and do that right away. They gave us a date by which they wanted to do it, which I think was 5 days out, so technically within the ordinance, but the scope of what they wanted to do was so significant that we urged them to work with us to ensure a safer plan for doing what they were doing. This was during the pandemic. We had a lot of focused attention and certain things that weren't happening that we didn't have to necessarily work on. And we did make some accommodations there where they worked with us and agreed to a different date. We did close some major streets. They started here at Wiley, marched from Miramar to Cedar to Warrenville Center. We coordinated with South Euclid Police as well as school district security. It took a lot of doing. We were attempting to allow, you know, we wanted to cooperate and have a peaceful event. And, you know, we accomplished that. And I think part of that was because we had worked, you know, with them as closely as we did, but we didn't quite literally drop everything we were doing and work on nothing but this for them to allow that to occur. But, you know, that was kind of extraordinary and it was outside of, you know, we would have been well within our rights under the existing ordinance to say, we don't have the resources to do that, you can't do that here. And then if they would have done it anyway, who knows what would have happened. You know, there is a problem with what Mr. Cooney is bringing up. As common sense as it may sound, it does, as Ms. Weiser brought up, lead itself to potential inconsistent rulings, treatments. So having some sort of objective criteria would be helpful. But time, place, manner restrictions when it comes to First Amendment are perfectly legal and are done all the time. And all these major protests we're seeing right now, none of them are in the street. Well, okay, I can't say that absolutely. But like the major one over at Market Square in Ohio City, that was all done on the sidewalks and in the public square and not in the street. Anybody who was in the street crossing against the light, they were subject to ticket.
So one of the also the reasons that we need a carve out, I think, is so the law is dealt out fairly to every group that wants to quickly assemble, because in the past, certain things have been allowed and certain things have been denied. So we want to make sure that it's equal for any type of group that wants to assemble. Mr. Epps?
What about block parties? Are block parties included in this?
That's a separate ordinance. It's a
So it's
standalone
not really an event that would close off the street then?
It is, but it's, my understanding is it's regulated in its own, separate.
I can't
Ordinance.
hear you, I'm sorry.
The block party has its own separate ordinance.
So maybe we should say that block parties are excluded from this chapter. Just so
I mean,
it's clear.
Or reference that.
Yeah, or reference to chapter it belongs to, yeah.
Yeah, Ms. Weiser?
Susan. What the mayor brought up is right, and Councilman Cooney. That's why I said, you can say, oh, they can go and do it, but. The problem is, when people are protesting in the street. There's usually a significance to that protest. That if the city comes in and. Can't work with them, can't handle it. You end up with a bigger problem that started with. And I think that covers any kind of a. Right. The second thing, in terms of consistency in part A, we needed to leave the mayor, who said just don't have to say. Since Mr. Brett brought up part A.
Yeah, I have that.
Just wanted to make a comment, based on my recollection, I think in 2020, when demonstrations were occurring, I believe South Euclid and Hurst both had two different demonstrations that utilized the parks. That did not occur on the roadway forward. In the event something is occurring at a regional level or beyond, where it could be time sensitive and not within the proposed 2 months in advance. I guess things like utilizing the city park can also be considered and factored in as has been done in other cities that are concerned.
Okay, so I think we,
Is there a possibility, what I'm hearing is bigger events that take the most time. If you're gonna do a 5K, if you're gonna do something that has if it's 5 people, it isn't gonna block anything, no. If it's 100 people, your planning goes up proportionately. So the number of people who are assembling or need these permits is a factor. So is there a cutoff in terms of planning time where maybe, could say anything over 30 participants requires 60-day notice? And then if it's just 10 to 15, 30-day notice. I mean, I understand the idea. I agree. The 5 days is ridiculous. We need to extend it. It's just, do we really need to extend it to 60 for a small event in a small area of the city? That's what I'm thinking.
I think another piece of it, it sounds like we should have a carve out. And I don't know what the proper term is offhand, we can go through some iterations with the law director, but quick time limits. I think that could be a separate item within this. We can keep the 60 days for these large events like you're asking for, and then let's do a first draft of that carve out and then see how that looks. I'll speak to the law director. Yeah, Mr. Goodman.
Question. Are you thinking something along the lines of, applications less than 60 days shall be at the discretion of the director of public safety?
So the problem is I'm nervous about bias. Not that I would hope nobody would do that, but we've seen it happen. So that makes me nervous. I don't know how to get past that piece.
I'm thinking it could be at that discretion, but you have to include a quick review of first responders. They they look at what the request is and that based on their experience, you know, getting something back in 5 days or 14 days or whatever may not be realistic. At least there would be a minimum cursory review between relevant parties. If it's less than 60 days. We're not saying it's gonna get, the permit will get approved, I'm saying it's gonna get denied, but at least it would be a first review. You know, if
So
they're
the
not. so-
discretion of the chiefs
Yeah.
and the director of public safety.
Yeah, but.
The problem is that, again,
For those,
that doesn't
those
preclude
unplanned.
you.
events.
Well, it makes sense in common code. You might look at it and say, well, that's common sense. There has to be something there, even for the smallest event. Otherwise, you're gonna have big events coming in and say 14 days before, we want a permit, then you're gonna have to say, oh, you're too large and planning. I would think, and I would think, planning for an event that has 15 to 20 people is very different than planning for an event that has 50 and above. So the larger things get the more lead time and smaller groups, it's lesser lead time, but I wouldn't make it any less than 3 days.
The only problem with that though is, the devil's advocate is, what is it that small group wants some big streets?
Somewhat.
That small group wants some bigger streets for visibility.
We have to say no, because the detailed route map and it will. And we're also saying we're establishing predetermined routes in C,
Right, that's what. yeah.
designed to minimize the disruptions. So even if I come in and say, hey, we got 15 people who want to march down the middle of Warrensville Center Road from Cedar to Fairmont. If it's not a predetermined route, the answer is can't do it, even if you got 15 people.
Hey, Chief, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna originally make a comment about lead time. And then, a couple of members have brought up some good points that correspond with it, about the bias and about some other points with planning. You know, the lead time isn't just, allowing the department heads flexibility for planning. It's also providing flexibility to the person requesting the permit to make the event. And I think that's where we run into issues where events had to be canceled in the past because of competing priorities with either streets that they want to host it on, or areas within the city, staffing that's available by city departments, and if they have to go out and hire their own staffing. And when there's not a lot of time permitted for them, then they don't have the flexibility to go out and get quotes for security or come up with an alternate route. And they have no choice but to either cancel themselves or be told, well, we're sorry, we can't help you. So as much as it benefits us, I think in a lot of cases, it'll benefit the person applying as well.
Let's try to go through more of the document. I think a lot of good points have been brought up. So in letter D, we're in letter D on the second page. It says fees for parades, events, assemblages, processions, or races shall be assessed based upon their size and the city services anticipated to be required, which we have to then go to page 3 because it doesn't really give it here kind of. I mean, it just says maximum amount of $1,500. Like, we're gonna have a tier or.
I'm losing a part of what you're saying, Vice Mayor, so.
Okay. I'm sorry. So in letter D, that's the small d.
You're
in
down to D.
D, yeah. So it's talking about fees, but there's no kind of tier structure. It just basically says when you get over to page 3, a maximum of $1,500. So I think I think we're making ourselves we're getting into the weeds in this ordinance a lot. I think either we're gonna, right now already, police and fire are close to $1,500, so Just make it flat. Cause that's,
When we're done talking about these, I want to go back to item 4. Liability
so we can go
insurance.
to that now.
For parades and races and stuff, that makes sense, but assembly, if people want to assemble, then you may not have. Just average people want to get together and protest something, they may not have liability insurance. I'm not sure how that fits in.
I think we need to have that as part of the bylaw also. While we're gonna work there, that's a good point. Does anyone have any other comments with letter D?
So it would be 1,500 for I, basically everything in I,
Yeah.
Well, that's,
1, 1, 2, and 3.
maybe it'd be helpful to go over what it says, because we have 3 different tiers. One tier, there's no fee. One tier, it's actual cost, but no more than 1,500, and the other tier is $500 plus the actual. And that last tier, 500 plus the actual cost. That's for all other, nonprofit, for-profit organizations, and those that do not have a high, or, they are not based in University High.
So I wanted to kind of, I have a lot of comments on I in general. I wanted to kind of go through the rest of the people, just because it's a little more complicated. Okay, the permit rate may be refused. Does anyone have any comments with 1 or 2? Those are pretty straightforward. Number 4 also is pretty straightforward. Obviously, finals.
I have a question. I mean, I'm not interested. But this is the raise conflicts with or which strain resources from a city-sponsored parade. Is this an attempt in an odd sort of way to prevent people from protesting against a city-sponsored parade or event?
I think it's just a conflict. I don't think it was an intention.
Yeah, it says the race concert. Okay. The permit can be refused or canceled if the parade, event, assembly, procession, or race conflicts with or would strain resources from a city-sponsored parade, event, assembly, or. And then it gets, or another race, but we have added in city-sponsored. And I just, in this day and age, where people sometimes want to protest what cities do, are we in essence ending up discriminating against their right to protest? Just needed to ask the question.
Tracy?
I'm reading that and just understanding it to mean, like, say there is a city-sponsored parade or event or assembly taking place at the time that they're requested. Is that what this means? Because that's what I think.
And we already said that,
Take it that way.
I'm reading it to mean that.
Well, it could be the time, but it could also be, within close time, close temper. For instance, when we have the Memorial Day parade, the extra overtime and extra resources that are required are tied up and dedicated to that. If somebody wants to have an event that can happen at any time, but they choose the day before Memorial Day, that's a lot harder for our police and fire staff when we're already staffing Memorial Day the next day.
Okay,
Okay.
as long as we can defend it.
So I guess
That's all it's for.
it's a question.
How about people protesting the Memorial Day parade?
So there's a race, the day of Memorial Day parade. Is that excessive for you?
I don't think we're doing that this year.
we've been able to manage it over the decades. That's a long day, but we've been able to manage it, and it's also it's a city sponsored function, so it's a little different than
That's a city sponsored something?
the Memorial Day parade.
No, the race. The race is not.
Oh, the
beforehand.
5K, well, yeah, the race in the morning is not, but the parade is, so it's. They've always gone hand in hand, in my recollection, since I worked there. And before that, obviously, as well, I don't know, currently what
Yeah.
this year's brand.
There is no. There's, to my knowledge, there's no University 5K on Memorial Day this year, wasn't last year either. There used to be one, and it started strictly as a city event, that got spun off and handled by the Howard Mack. His racing group until he retired, and he sold the rights to another racing group, Run the Land. And then Run the Land, decided not to, host that particular event anymore, so they wound it up.
Right, so
So
let's,
could we just say at the very end that for which a permit has been issued on the same day, that we're on the same day, for the same day.
I believe it's already in there.
But like the mayor said, it could be an event the day before. That they, or they, they're requested to do it the day before, would still put a strain on our people.
yeah, that's,
I think that's a little too specific. I don't think it has to be a city sponsored parade. It could be any other event. It could be any other event that's already submitted an application.
Yeah, it's in this.
yeah, it says another.
It's at the end. Possible to say.
Here's the original specified thing.
Yeah, it's redundant almost. It feels extraneous. It doesn't, I think it's irrelevant if it's a city sponsored or not. If it's too much for us to handle, whatever that,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
you know, just. I think
It, that it doesn't necessarily have to say.
Like you're saying, it's almost like it's preventative or something. Is a little
Something
off.
tricky, yeah.
We can take that out because it has, we could just say parade.
Any event,
Yeah, I mean,
The city sponsor.
and that
Oh,
includes
just any age.
an event that's scheduled is a city sponsored event as well as a private.
Thank you.
Just to correlate with that, I was gonna point out at the very end, it says for race for which a permit has been issued.
Yeah.
I was originally just gonna suggest that maybe you strike race and put it back.
Level.
all right, great. Letter F. Are we asking the organizers to get their own security or to organize with our city security? Because it sounds, I'm reading it that it doesn't sound like the city wants to have anything to do with the security.
Where are you?
Letter F.
I will say in the past, especially while we've been short-staffed, we've had issues with having to repeatedly order officers to work these events. To the point now where our union reps and our administration has agreed to that we're still understaffed as well. For city sponsored events or private events that we give the officers reasonable time to have first option to sign up and volunteer to work it. If we can't get anybody to work it, then we coordinate with the vendor or even the city to outsource certain types of security components.
So we need to change that wording to give our city the first dibs on any security.
Question. Is this direct, when you? Can they hire security people instead of off-duty police officers?
For a race, yes, security and generally marked cruisers act like as a lead car for a race and a trail car that can be done by numerous private entities, security contractors.
Did you say they
They
need
said
to,
off-duty police officers.
how do we just say that they need to,
Depends on the event too, it just depends.
they need to discuss it with the
And that's,
city police department?
yeah, and that kind of comes furthering that language where it talks about, safety standards, and we're going to specifically to each proposed event.
We need to discuss it with you first. So.
Oh, yes. Yes, there'd be a lot of dialogue.
We also need purposes.
So yeah, thank you. Okay, letter G. I don't think there is anything with that. Okay, so now we're coming up to the fees. So there seems to be a little bit of disconnect here. So on one hand, we're saying that for-profit and nonprofit organizations have to pay the 500 plus the additional and $1,000 deposit. But the schools and nonprofit entities don't have to pay. I'm sorry, the schools and the nonprofit have a max of 1,500, but you have nonprofit on top also.
University Heights nonprofit. It should be University Heights private schools and University Heights nonprofit.
What's a University Heights nonprofit entity?
Well, either one that's headquartered here or has a legitimate, tie to this community.
Okay, but then
Would that be,
you have,
I guess my question, Debbie, the filing with the Secretary of State would list the addresses University Heights.
That would be one way.
I'm just not sure. I don't know, I'm a little conflicted, like, you're gonna. I mean, I guess. Your nonprofit or your University Heights non, I don't know, we still have to have the resources of the $1,500 for the police and fire. No matter what. So if they're University Heights nonprofit, with John Carroll is a nonprofit also, it says UH colleges, but. So none of them are ever gonna pay anything, the schools and John Carroll. But then other nonprofits have to, I don't know, I want some discussion on that.
Please understand, I'm playing devil's advocate with some of these questions. The public schools and the parent teacher organizations are taxed. UH colleges and universities, of which there's only one, are not taxed money. So why are we lumping them with UH public schools and parent teachers?
No.
Yeah.
Because they don't charge us now for use of their facility.
Okay, so this is a quid pro quo.
If you want to call it that, you could. What I don't want to do is start charging John Carroll University for a 5K on the street, and then every time we host an event, they start charging us book rate.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What about the CIC?
University Heights nonprofit,
Yeah, it's a nonprofit,
so that would be under,
so it too would be charged that. So the CIC, when it sponsored those, or attempted to sponsor those races, actually would have had to come up with a significant much more amount of dollars in order to do it.
No,
Quick,
right, because isn't CIC considered university?
It is University Heights.
So
So
is it-
University Heights private schools and nonprofit entities, actual cost of the city with the maximum amount charged of 1,500.
There's already an ordinance that applies to the CIC with regard to city personnel being able to do work for the CIC without the city charging the CIC. I think you've already got a superseding ordinance.
Thank you.
okay, so is everybody comfortable with number 2, that they get charged a maximum of 1,500? And then we can go up to number 1, which is a little more complicated.
There's some. So it's nonprofit entities.
So
With-
the one thing,
Does Jason, there's a sports group, run 5 days?
Yeah, there's the Jason Goldbach Bowl. Which, obviously be a nonprofit. Um. The resources used for that are pretty minimal. Essentially, they have the event like on their campus. But they do run through the street. They don't cross Warrens with Center Road. Basically, it's a loop. You exit Jesu and then you, move through like Washington Boulevard, go around John Carroll Boulevard, and back over to Jesu.
So the city charge of that?
well, now they're gonna be charged $1,500.
Yeah, I mean, the quite of the maximum $1,500, so I understand. If I get into this twice, is we have a University Heights entity. Most likely University Heights residents. Should they're already contributing a lot of different ways towards the city, should they contribute towards this? Historically, in my direct experience with that particular race, it's very minimal. Any off-duty police, I can't give you an exact number, but it's fairly minimal. Because we do have to, the Jays did have to coordinate with, we had to hire a, so it's not run the land, I forget what it's called, for the event, they basically would set everything up, work with the city, establish the route. So,
I'm just feeling that University Heights private schools and nonprofit entities, shouldn't be charged just like in number 3. Residents, there's,
You're right, Chris. In terms of Jason, it's probably both. Very participants. But there are other nonprofit groups and who knows, somebody might want to do one in a similar fashion. And if we do for one, we have to do for the other. And if we're saying nonprofit, this charge.
so that's what
I
I'm
just,
saying.
it's just, the devil is in ordinances and laws that are written as black and white. And then if we don't pay attention to the details, they come back to bite us.
That's what I'm saying. I'm thinking that number 2, University Heights private schools and University Heights nonprofit should also have no fee. What's everybody else saying? Yes.
So in that case, with number one, have to be differentiated and say persons in a for-profit, nonprofit organization entities outside of university. Like, be really clear, because to me, it's like we have to wait to get to the next, point to, understand where you fit, and then go back and forth. If that's where we're going, we're going to differentiate.
Okay,
What do you, so I don't know what that is, what do you suggest?
University Heights private schools and University Heights nonprofit entities also have no fee. And then she said in number 1, persons and for-profit and nonprofit organizations and entities outside of university.
Not based.
They're not based. Correct wording.
And then in that case, you would combine 2.
Okay, so I guess the question in number 1 is who is deciding what the additional costs are?
There's a safety to that.
Well, yes, in conjunction with, service, police and fire, for instance. We can estimate what an employee costs a time and a half for the number of hours we expect and the number of employees and come up with a figure. And one of the reasons why Mr. Pennington and the chiefs are here are because, they do that and, or are able to do that. And are able to then, let those organizations that would be responsible for covering those costs and being billed, we're able to give them an estimate of what we anticipate that to be in advance so that they can plan on it. If it's an event that's like a running race where there's an entry fee to run, they can factor into the price of that event, how they cover their costs.
So are we encompassing all of the fees of police, fire and service? Is there anything else getting? I just don't want organizations to get hit with it. They're not gonna know till after, that's the problem. How's that fair?
Well, you know, I don't know, you know, police, fire and service are the obvious ones. You know, if there's a given event where there'd be something else that were needed beyond that. You know, I suppose, for instance, if it were, you know, spitballing here, there used to be an event called the Color Run that involved a lot of colored chalk. And if something extraordinary or different had to be done to clean up after that, to clean up all that chalk, that might cost a little bit more. There may be a little bit more that has to be done for street sweeping after the fact that might not otherwise be. Mr. Penning might have a better idea of what this came up.
There's also events that will take place, say, at the wall. And say it's a larger event, they may need to provide for equipment facility, other than the two that we have and things like that. So that's where there may be other fees that they have to be associated with a particular event, running a porta johns, things such as that. So there are other fees, you start talking about the things. My workers are required to work 4 hours minimum at $46 an hour, generally for their overtime rates, so you're talking 2 workers, $92 an hour. Times 4 hours, you're not quite $400 right there. The event's longer than 4 hours, or the cleanup before or after takes longer, and then fee would increase.
My concern just is that those organizations don't know what the cost is front. And Mr. King?
Wiser in staff.
Well, that's
I don't know if we need to look at that. Talking about, like, we could see how, the agreement's construction. The agreement is constructed, the terms to cover those things. I mean, it's common, it should be,
usually dollar
well, yeah, but it can list types of things.
like hourly and.
Yes, that's not a surprise.
And budget.
My knowledge. And then outside the terms of the law.
Well, with all, it's been a long period. I know there's been some races or something needed for portal facilities, but I can't recall if those were interior to the city with the exterior.
There, you know, there was at least planned, there had been a series of youth races that were intended for the wall, and then I think they were ultimately canceled due to lack of registration, but they were planned. The Deny Breath Run has been starts and finishes at the wall. But most of that race happens, of course, on the streets, but the ceremonies is on out the wall. People use the trash cans and stuff. Usually clean up before and after. But there are other instances where we have been, you know, less inclined to make the wall available because we don't have the means of charging them to use it. If we were inclined to let somebody propose, you know, reserving it for an event.
Mr. King?
So what I was gonna say, we have the 60-day time that we talked about here, where it makes sense to have other. City services could cost. Might be appropriate there.
Unless we have some kind of contract that needs to be part of the agreement, which lists rates and approximate hours. Yeah, Mr. Quinn?
Thank you. If you look at G4, the permit may prescribe reasonable conditions, including the city services necessary for the event, such as police, fire, EMS, fire prevention, and public service and sanitation. It goes into H. In addition to permit fees, organizers may be responsible for the cost of additional city services required by the event, such as trash removal, restroom facilities, or utility access to ensure minimal disruption to residents and businesses. So they should be aware of those estimates leading into it. They have to provide an estimate of the participants, which is earlier in the ordinance. And I think it reinforces what, Chief Purple and Chief Rogers has said in regards to the 60 days of Purple for communication for review plans. And I agree with you, Mrs. Weiss, is that the event should be aware of those costs so they can prepare, have an appropriate amount of time to prepare for them, for the event, and then obviously, what it may entail in regards to the city services that are required.
It could be that the permit needs to be updated to include those fees, just so we are aware of the hourly rates and the blocks of hours that each department is requiring. I don't know who issues the permit for this. Yeah,
Well, I mean, the city does. I mean, that's something that would come usually from me. Ultimately, as mayor and safety director, I grant permission, for the event. I get final approval for whether we're doing this. So that permit usually takes, the form of a letter or an email from me, usually an email letter.
but it's not a formalized permit, so.
You may consider this your permit for the event. But in this instance, if we're talking about, here we're setting forth, specifically, the hours, the routes, the streets, services necessary, and the cost of them. Then these are all things that go into this and would be, that is supposed to be provided. But if we find ourselves in a situation where, we believe that we need only this many police, this many fire, this many service, and what was billed as a event for 20 to 25 people, ends up being an event for 400 people, well, we're gonna need a few more people to come out and help clean up, so, based upon certain information, this is what we believe it's gonna cost, but we gotta be able to keep the cost of ends up being considerably more. I don't see us in a situation where we're counting the number of people in the event, and then once they hit a certain number, we say, sorry, you're shut down, you want to go home now. I don't think anybody wants.
Yeah, Mr. Gooding.
So Beechwood, city of Beechwood has an ordinance in regards to, trades and certain events. They may reference in it is that, the fee shall, for the fees $1,000, which must be submitted with the application. The fee will cover up to the cost of 6 police officers to staff the event. After a review should be approved, an additional fee of $100 per police officer will be required for the events required deployment of more than 6 officers. So they reference that, so in case it does increase with that. The city of Lakewood has with each permit application, it's $300 essentially. After the parade special event, then all director and direct costs when calculated, the applicant will be billed for the difference. They're going to get a bill for that. Rocky River has, and this goes back to 1970. This is from 1979. Was their charge for the event was $500. That was not to exceed $500. And for the provision of safety forces for the protection of participants, may charge up to $15 per hour per man for the provision. So it's 1979, again, $15. So in some context. So I think it would be appropriate to have something that says, after review, I think they should get an estimate, but obviously they're hoping for success. That would probably leave it to the discretion of probably the fire police and the safety director to make it a determination that requirements are met during the application.
Sure, so why don't I work with the law director for these updates and the carve out, and if the carve out is relatively easy in the law director's opinion, then we can present it
either the next council meeting or council meeting after, otherwise I'll bring it back to the committee. To discuss it further. Ms. Ryder?
I'm still bothered in a way by size. Either if it's something with 10 people, or they're gonna want to pay $500. I'm being really serious here. Do we want to exclude those smaller events? Because if we're charging them $500 to exclude.
Well, that's for people that have no tie to University Heights. So if we have an outside group, not a University Heights school or nonprofit organization or for-profit organization, it's some group from, I don't know, pick on Willoughby or Sheldon or any other community in particular, but if there's some out-of-town business that thinks they're gonna have an event here and only 10 people show up, yeah, it's still $500. And fees that they are.
But University Heights private schools and non-profit entities actual cost to the city.
I think that was combined, it was collapsed into 3 earlier in the conversation, that those items are now.
I don't think we didn't collapse it.
Yeah, we did two and three.
We did. Okay, so we said the private schools and nonprofit entities, as long as they're based in University Heights, they're still free.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm okay.
Yeah, Chief.
The law director's been doing, assisting me with a comprehensive review of our fire prevention fees and ordinances. And part of the fee structure in there was for cost of man hours of overtime and cost of apparatus per hour. So we built out for various types of apparatus. There's the cost of operating a vehicle and many types of events, how much that would cost, and put in some minimums in there, either from like the CBA outlines for what we think is best practice for the apparatus. And I think the intention there was that for something like this, there would be like your basic permit fee of $100 or $500 or something, whatever the city would agree on, and then your ancillary services for each of the department functions. It's required to refer to that permit fee.
So that's interesting. That's a whole conversation about performance-based budgeting. That, I don't know if we wanna enter into this ordinance, because then it just increases the cost even more. But I like that you're doing it. You could be our guinea pig.
Well, it came up in discussion years ago regarding fireworks. Someone on council had asked at that time, how much does it cost for us to staff that event? And including, fuel for the trucks and all that stuff. And that's kind of where it started. We would have a lot of those vehicles at these various events too, so we just built it out that way that regardless of whatever fee was issued from the city for the permit, if we're going to pick up personnel costs and operating costs, just for fire at that point. Well,
I think that's definitely the way that you do. Okay, so, are there any other comments before we adjourn? Okay, so I will get these edits done with the law director and we will bring it up to the council. Here, I will adjourn. Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you.